Your Creative Push, episode 27.
I think it's important, though, to take that time to just stare at it and love it. Have those moments of self-love.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Gwenn Seemel. If you missed yesterday's episode, you can easily access it by just scrolling back in your podcast player or go to yourcreativepush.com/26. That being said, I'll get out of the way and get back into the conclusion of my conversation with artist Gwenn Seemel. Can you take us back to maybe one of your worst or hardest times in terms of like dealing with resistance?
You know, so you gave me the questions ahead of time, so I had to really think on this one, and it was a difficult one. And I think ultimately what I'm going to say is that it's not one moment. I regularly have my worst moment, my hardest time, and I actually have a name for it. I call it the stupids.
That's good.
You know, it's like this affliction where it is everything that comes out of your mouth, everything that comes out of your hand or whatever is just dumb. And I always think back to when I was in the 3rd grade. I remember very clearly, it was like towards the end of the 3rd grade, or maybe it was the beginning of the 4th, whatever it was. All of a sudden I was crying in bed, and I remember like the lights were out, my mom was putting me to bed or was saying goodnight or something, or maybe she heard me crying, I don't know, and she comes in and I like sobbing at her like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do the 4th grade, it's so hard. And you know, so when you think about that, when you realize that anytime you take risks, you're going to have these like this crippling self-doubt sometimes. That's going to be a part of it. And if you can remember the time when you had it as a 3rd grader, it suddenly seems easier when you have it as a 34-year-old, because you're like, okay, so I actually made it into the 4th grade and well beyond that. So that means that this that I'm going through right now is totally normal, and this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then sometimes like the harder it is, like the harder the 3rd grade is, like, or the 4th grade rather, like the best it feels, like
it's true.
That summer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that translates well too. Like the harder something is, like the greater you're gonna feel like when you come out the other end, and you're not gonna die from it, you know. You're not gonna
totally.
So what do you call what's the antithesis of the stupids?
I don't have a name for that, but I have lots of best moments also. Every time I finish anything, pretty much. I think the high is higher when it's a painting, because that is really my chosen medium. But even when I finish a video or a drawing or a photo or an article, whatever, there's this moment right as I finish it, and sometimes it even lasts for a couple of days, where I look at the thing and I look at it lovingly, and like I can see where it's flawed, you know, where maybe it's not quite as perfect, but I love those spots where it's just those flaws are so me. And I can just, it's not even like a feeling of accomplishment. I mean, I think that's maybe part of it. Like, look, I finished the thing, it's done. But also just enjoying the thing itself and enjoying it in this really, I don't know. It's just that time when you just finished the thing and it's in the world finally. That is my best moment. And that's why I keep on making, is to get that best moment again and again and again.
Yeah, that's kind of addicting, and it's yeah, I always feel weird too, like if I create something and I like stare at it for too long and I realize that, oh crap, I've been like admiring my own whatever it is. Oh, that sentence is great, or oh, this segment of this music video is great, or like last night I finally like finished the logo for this podcast and I was like, all right.
I think it's important though to take that time to just stare at it and love it. I think it's so important to like have those moments of self-love and to recognize them as moments of self-love and like really stew in them, because you stew in the self-doubt. So you might as well stew in the self-love a bit too.
Yeah, and it can also help you gain confidence as far as like going on to the next thing. You're like, all right, I made this. This is very close to like what I had in my mind before I made it, and look, here it is in the world. Unless I like completely trash it or like delete the file or like burn the canvas or whatever it is, it's here to stay. Like it's something that I've permanently put out there, and that's a really great feeling, and something that I hope that the listeners will incorporate into their lives and get to that spot and then share with us.
Yeah.
So you have a lot that you do. What is your formula for balancing your time?
I don't think I really balance it all that well. I've sort of set up my life so that it can be all about my art. I married someone who is all about his art, and so, we do take time away from the studio, and I'm not going to say that we don't, but we've also set stuff up in such a way that we, like, even between us, it's not like there's a jealousy of his creative time or his of mine. So not even in that intimate relationship do I have that sort of pull away. I don't think that it's right for every artist. Like, I don't think every artist should devote themselves full time to their work, and that's the only way to be a true artist. I think that, there are people who really thrive with having the structure of a day job, and also the stability of the paycheck from a day job, and I don't think that people should feel like they have to quit that in order to be a true artist. I think that's a misunderstanding, frankly. Different people need different things. So for me, what works, and partly because of my chronic illness, is to be my own boss completely and to work all the time. I couldn't work for anyone else at this point because probably psychologically I couldn't, because it's just been too long since I've really lived by anyone else's schedule, but also my body won't do that. I just am in so much pain sometimes that I don't know if I could leave the house. So I guess I don't really balance my time that well. I try to be healthy and get out of the house and do those things, but I don't have a lot of requirements on my time. It's all me who decides stuff. So I'm really lucky in that way, and it works for me.
Yeah, it is really tough to work for somebody when you haven't worked for somebody in a while, and you're lucky that you can do that you have the freedom to do that. I think that's a dream that a lot of people listening have. Mm-hmm. That being said, what does art and creativity, what does that bring to your life?
Very simply put, the desire and the ability to be in this world. Not to get too heavy, but especially right after I was diagnosed with the illness, and I was like, basically the treatment for it in Western medicine is a bunch of hormones. And hormones can really mess with your brain a lot. I went through a pretty unhappy time, and even before that I'd struggled with, anxiety and depression and stuff. And the thing that heals is also the thing that I do for a living. So that works out, it allows me to be in this world. So
that's a good answer. Who would you say is your greatest inspiration?
You.
Me?
Yeah, you, everybody, you and every single person I meet.
Yeah.
And that goes back to being a portraitist too.
Yeah, I was just gonna
being
say.
Fascinated by how others are in the world and what they choose to share too. I'm always really interested in, when I go into a situation where I'm doing a portrait, I get to ask all of these questions that you don't normally get to ask of people when you first meet them. And it's really just stunning to watch someone build an image of themselves as they're speaking to the stranger who's going to make this painting of them, and tell the stories that they want to have told, and what that means about that person. And just a couple weeks ago, I did an interview with someone, and they were talking about how they feel like in their lives, they're in their 60s now, in their life, people have just sort of come in and out of their life. And they used to sort of get upset about this idea that people would just leave their lives. But then they realized that sometimes that's what's necessary. That's what needed to happen. Either that person needed to learn something from them, or they needed to learn something from that person, or even that they were part of some messed up scenario that had to happen in this other person's life. And so they ended up in this crappy situation, and it really didn't have anything to do with them. Anyway, the point is that this person was talking about this whole thing that was going through her mind, and it just really, it resonated with me and helped me sort of put pieces together in my life. And it was this wonderful moment of connection and of we're having that moment where I'm in your life for a minute and then I'm going to leave. I mean, not totally, but anyway, so yeah, people, you all are my inspiration.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think that it kind of goes back to what you're saying about remixing and how everybody kind of shares from other people's artwork. Totally. I think people share with each other too. John Lee Dumas always says this quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Oh yeah, huh?
I've talked about this on the show too, about how like I'm a poker dealer and I'm surrounded by just negative people who are losing money all day. You become that, you know? So it's really hard to, like, you have to surround yourself when you're out of the job with other people. And this podcast has been like awesome for that, because I every day get to talk to somebody new and like be inspired in that way. It's changed me. I stopped watching TV. Like, I'm implementing all these things that people like you are telling me. And it's awesome. It's amazing.
Nice.
Have you ever thought of doing a podcast, like, for each portrait you do? Like, you say you have to interview them. Like, have you ever thought of doing that, or do you think that people are not interested in having those details shared?
Yeah, I think it would definitely change. Already I'm photographing, so I work from photographs I take myself during the course of an interview, and it takes about an hour and a half to do that. And I do think that already having my camera snapping away at them is a lot. And if I were also recording it, people might not share as openly. I have gone back and done short video interviews with people who have had their portraits done. So it's like the person with their portrait, and we're all talking. And I do a lot of videos. I think that's more my medium, mostly not because I'm a visual person necessarily, because it's not even like my videos are that visually interesting all the time. Sometimes it's just a talking head of me. But I think I prefer the shorter format, like the 5-minute tops sort of a thing is, I think, more the way that my brain works in terms of chunking out ideas. So yeah, the podcast, I like listening to them, but I'm not sure I could do one.
Yeah, I hear you. It's a interesting experience.
For sure, I imagine.
Gwen, do you have a favorite book or like YouTube clip or anything else that you perhaps draw inspiration from that maybe we could too?
Do I ever? I could not pick just one, so just buckle up, because I got a whole list for you.
Okay, you already mentioned Zubiquity.
That's right, yeah.
Cool.
And then I would say that my current favorite for creative inspiration would be Linda Berry, generally speaking. But specifically, I love her book, What It Is. And a lot of her more recent work is specifically about creativity. And they're just these beautiful books that are basically tapestries of words and images. And you have to like learn how to read her work in order to read her work, because the images and the words are woven together in such a phenomenal way. I just cannot recommend her work enough. And specifically, or if you're interested in creative stuff and overcoming self-doubt and all of that, her more recent work is more about that. And then there's Lawrence Lessig's Free Culture, which is all about the uncopywriting stuff that I was talking about. He's a little bit less radical than I am. He is actually one of the, or maybe he is the inventor, I don't know, of Creative Commons, which is the method for sort of deconstructing copyright. So if you want some of the rights that are associated with your copyright, but not all of them, Creative Commons allows you to communicate that very quickly and easily to your audience. So if you want people to ask for permission only if they want to use your work commercially, you can say that with these Creative Commons licenses. And this is the guy who invented them, and he's just an all-around fascinating fellow. And there's actually a great movie that he's in. It's a documentary called RIP, a Remix Manifesto, that I'm pretty sure is available for free on Vimeo still. He's in it. A lot of other luminaries of the free culture universe are in it, and it's just a really inspiring movie about creativity all around. I also love Bell Hooks' All About Love, because I think that as artists or creatives or creative souls, or however you identify, understanding what love is pretty key. Maybe that's my own bias, again, going back to loving others and having that be a huge part of my experience, but I love that book. And along those same lines, Adam Grant's Give and Take. He's actually a consultant. I think that's what he does professionally. So he goes into companies and tells them how to do things better, I think. But he wrote this book about being a giver, being a taker, and who's the most successful. And it was a fascinating read and a fascinating look at how humans and human behavior works. And along those same lines, there's The Myth of Choice by Kent Greenfield, which reveals how we are not actually as in control of all the things that happen in our lives as we think we are. So it's a great empathy building book, because all of a sudden it's not only about like, maybe it will help you as well to realize like, oh, maybe if I didn't do art as my primary career, there were other influences. It wasn't just that I'm not brave enough or I'm too lazy or whatever. There's a lot of pressures that we all live with. And so the myth of choice really gets into that in a really, really cool way. And then one last book, because I just can't help myself. It's Covering by Kenji Yoshino. It's so he's a legal scholar and a poet. So you can kind of imagine what the book is like because of that. It's this beautifully crafted text. And it's about how sort of the last bastion of civil rights, like the last thing that we need to deal with, is that we still ask people who are marginalized in some way to cover. We don't ask them to pass or to try to pass, but we ask them to sort of minimize their differences and why that's bad. But he also talks about his own journey, and specifically one part that still sticks with me, even though I read this like 3 or 4 years ago, is that he talks about how in order to become you, he feels like you have to kill off these other parts of yourself, like kill off the poet self or kill off the whatever, so that you can be the person you're meant to be. And he describes, or he tells the story of describing this to a friend of his, and the friend was like, yeah, but those like versions of you that you quote kill off, they live on as ghosts that prod you. And I just really loved that description, because I feel like we do, or I don't know, I really related to it, where I was like, yes, I live with ghosts, and they do push me. Like there are other paths I could have taken. And so I don't know if that resonates with you or with any of your listeners, but it's a good book.
Yeah, it's really hard to kill off a part of yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always try to. The most recent part of me that I've killed off is the part that likes to sit on the couch and watch TV all night. And my wife never watched TV before, but now since we got married, she watches like every show ever. So when I come home from work, I have to like close my ears as she's watching a show that I think about watching maybe 5 years in the future when I have some free time. But
right.
Yeah, so they're always around. And those are some great resources, and now I have a million books to read. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you can find them at yourcreativepush.com/Gwenn Seemel. That's GwennSeemel. Gwenn, now it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone, grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already inspired today, and give them that final push into doing that creative thing that they're thinking of.
All right. The thing that has helped me the most, and that has pushed me the most, and especially recently, is to acknowledge that mistakes are my friend. I get this feeling sometimes when I look back at my old work and I kind of cringe, because I'm like, oh, I should have done this differently or that differently. But like reframing that and thinking of that cringing feeling as something good instead is so helpful. And the reason why the mistake is good is because it means that you at least did a thing, you know, like you have something to view as a mistake. Not everybody does, except their mistake would be of not doing anything in the first place. So like that's already huge. You did the thing. So even if it feels like a mistake now, you did it. And then also, if you're viewing it as a mistake now, it probably means that your taste has evolved, and maybe it didn't get better. Maybe it did. I don't know, but it's changed. And so you're not stagnating. And that is also huge. So mistakes, very, very good.
Very, very good. Yeah, like you said, number one is doing the thing, and number two is learning from the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Gwenn, thank you so much for coming on the show today and giving us that push.
Thank you.
You can find Gwenn on her website, which is GwennSeemel.com, or on Facebook at Gwenn Seemel. That's GwennSeemel. And on Twitter and Instagram, she is Gwenn Paints with 2 N's, GwennPaints. And also on redbubble.com/people/Gwenn Paints. And can you tell us about Redbubble for people who don't know?
Sure. It's like it's a print-on-demand site. There's lots of different kinds. I just happen to choose Redbubble. I think it's really great for creatives of all levels of confidence to actually put their work on print-on-demand sites. Not only could you actually start building some income, getting a little money here and there if people buy your designs, but you'll start to feel what it's like to get your work out there. And those sites usually have sort of internal promotion ways where you can join groups and you can kind of like get feedback from other artists. And I think they're a great platform for people to start getting into that world of getting feedback for their work and publishing it.
Perfect. Great resource. And you can also find all the information that we talked about today, all the resources, as well as her TED Talk and everything else. You can buy her book, yourcreativepush.com/Gwenn Seemel. Gwenn, thank you again so much, and we appreciate your push.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwenn. That was such a great conversation with just such a truly cool person. And she has a great story, and I really love everything that she stands for. And just her positive outlook on art and creativity, and just the perfect guest for this show. Gwenn and I were talking about how during her final push, I had like an out-of-body experience, because the night before I was thinking her exact answer, really, that if you're viewing something as a mistake, that means that you are evolving and you're not, remaining stagnant. The mistake is kind of, evidence that, you did the thing in the first place. It shows where you were and hopefully, where you're going. And if you find yourself not having mistakes, that means that you are probably either superhuman and amazing at the thing that you're trying to do, or you don't have a good grasp on, your art and your process. So all in all, just an awesome conversation. I really hope that it resonated with everyone and inspired you to do work. Just enough time for a few iTunes ratings and reviews shout outs. Gene HPLN said, really enjoy the topics. As a creative person, I really appreciate this podcast. JBad123 said, I struggle with writer's block, so it is great to have found a podcast focusing on breaking through that. Smita said, loving the stories of the creatives and totally pushing me to create more. And John Ackley said, your creative push looks at that moment familiar to all artists when creativity eludes them. This show shares the different views and approaches on pushing through that moment and casts an important light on what it means to be an artist. So, really nice of you all to say such great things about the show. I appreciate those 5-star reviews, and if you haven't yet left us a review, please do. It helps other people find the show, and it helps to move us up in the rankings, where we are currently sitting as king right now in New and Noteworthy for arts and visual arts as well as education. It's amazing. I still can't quite believe it. Just so appreciative of everyone that's reached out to me to push me to continue to make the show. And if you want to drop me a personal line, just hit me up at youngman@yourcreativepush.com. I will respond to everybody who writes to me. Definitely looking for suggestions, improvements, or just your personal stories. I love to hear them. On tomorrow's show, we have artist Kelly McKernan.
This is like take path A for, the happiest life you could have, doing what you love for a living. And path B is just continue doing what you're doing already, whether it's, safer, more practical, more stable. What is going to make you happy in the end? What is going to make you excited about waking up? And what are you going to go to bed with on your mind every night? Go for the happy life. Go for the happy path.
Kelly is an awesome artist who was kind enough to come on the show to give us that push. So hopefully you were pushed enough today to get some work done today, but if not, we will be here for you tomorrow if you need it again. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great and productive day.